Bumbox.
Cuando hablamos de educación, siempre hay un país que aparece en todas las conversaciones. Finlandia es un ejemplo para muchos. Bueno, pues en nuestro video podcast, el profesor, yo, Sergio Fajardo, con Educación Todo se puede, tuve una invitada muy especial, la exministra de Educación de Finlandia, Li Andersson. Cuando la entrevisté todavía era ministra en funciones, pero el testimonio es muy valioso y lo quiero compartir con ustedes. Escuchémosla con mucha atención. Y recuerden, nos pueden ver y escuchar en todas las plataformas de streaming. Activen las notificaciones, nos pueden seguir en las redes sociales y todos los comentarios que ustedes quieran enviarnos los atenderemos con mucha atención. Así vamos a grabar muchos más programas en nuestro video podcast y nos interesa muchísimo conocer qué es lo que ustedes piensan y nos sugieren.
Minister, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Very happy to be able to participate in the podcast.
So am I. And I'm very glad to have you here. And we will have a very nice conversation about education. But before we get into education, I always like to talk to the people who I invite to talk about your earliest steps in life. Where did you study? Where were you born? How you move around education, school, and always ask if you remember a teacher who was an important figure in your earliest steps in life.
Well, my name is, as you said, Li Andersson, and I was born in the city of Turku, which is one of the around fifth biggest cities in Finland. And before I went into politics, I studied international law and international human rights law, but I was also a student activist. So I started being involved in the student organizations already when I was 16, 17 years old, and continued all the way through university. And I was also active in the party youth organization before I was elected into parliament. So I did a lot of work as an activist with issues related to education and also the rights of youth and students. And one teacher that was very important for me personally was the teacher teaching history on upper secondary level. So when I was 16, 17, 18, and he had this great way of teaching where he would always try and portray developments in society and also challenge us to kind of start thinking about what different developments might lead to in the future. So really involving the students in his teaching and also developing our knowledge of how changes happen in society.
Do you remember his name?
His name was Kristoffer Enström,
Muy bien.
if I remember it correctly.
Okay, good. We were talking about, before we began this interview, we were talking about the weather in Finland these days, and I told the minister that I was drinking a wonderful Colombian cup of coffee. But I wanted to ask you, out of curiosity, Minister, if I tell you Colombia, what comes to your mind?
Well, I would say maybe three things. Of course, as you mentioned, actually coffee, because you probably know that Finns are very heavy coffee drinkers. So we, of course, also know of the most famous coffee producing countries in the world, such as Colombia, because it's so dark and cold here that we need a lot of coffee to stay awake. I also think about nature, the beautiful different kinds of natures that you have in Colombia, and of course also societal issues related to drugs and crime and so on, which I know that you are all working very hard also on solving there.
Definitely, those are three points that characterize us in front of the world. We are the second biodiversity-rich country in the world, and it's extraordinary down here. I hope you come here soon, and we will have time to drink coffee, show you our beautiful country, and talk about the conflicts that we have that are deep. But part of my work, or what we pretend here, is education has to be a key issue in working out the many possibilities that we have and at the same time the problems that we have. But let's talk about a little bit about Finland. Whenever we think of Finland, we think of something very far away from here, very cold, very cold. And we, for example, reading, and let's go on to this point, reading recently, Finland appears in this worldwide classification of happy countries as the happiest country in the world. Tell us a little bit about the Finns' character, the personality of these. Of course, this is very difficult, but some characters that you have and that you can share with us here in Colombia, in Latin America, and of course, this video podcast can be heard all throughout the planet.
Well, if I think about characteristics that define Finns, I think most would say that Finns are people of not that many words.
Okay.
I think we're quite
We have to change that
quiet
today.
and timid. Yes, but like general characteristics of Finnish people. But I think also like once you get to know Finnish people and kind of get under the shell, then they will be very loyal friends for the rest of your lives. And coming back to what you said also about education, it is something that I feel that all Finns really value. And it also comes back to Finnish history, that Finland, if you look at this country 100 years ago or a little more, used to be one of the poorest countries in Europe. And the story of how Finland was born as independent country is not a very beautiful one, because right after independence, we had a civil war, basically a class war between the working class and the owning class in the country, which also was a very bloody one with many casualties and also prison camps. And from that point, not that many people know Finnish history, so that's why I always start with this.
And it's
So
good. Glad to
from
have
that
it.
point, if you look what has happened in 100 years, today we are one of the, you can say, countries that you choose to be the happiest one in the world, and also a country that is very successful on many, if you look at welfare, for example, or employment or health or these kind of indicators. And my opinion is that the most central thing that we have done right is to invest in education and invest in equal education, so education for all.
And that's why we are talking to you, because Finland is recognized worldwide as an extraordinary example of how a country can bet on a national purpose. And in this case, you had, as you have mentioned, education as a theme, as a project, as a national public good that everyone values and is proud of. So I want to know a little bit more about, when did you begin building this education system that makes Finland an example throughout the world?
Well, the real building started after the Second World War, which also affected Finland because the Soviet Union invaded Finland. So we had to go to war 2 times in those times. And after the wars ended in 1944, there started like a new era in Finnish society with a lot of welfare reforms and a lot of investment in public services, in the social security sector, and also a lot of improvement in workers' rights. And the biggest, most important decision was done in the 60s, when they designed a new structure for our primary education, which was based on the principle of equality, meaning that all children no matter their family background, no matter their family's income, will go to the same public schools together in all of the countries. And already in the 40s, they also introduced free school meals in the middle of the day as a kind of a social innovation, to also to be able to invest in the well-being of the children. But the big reform of our primary education system, which was designed in the 60s and implemented in the beginning of the 70s, was the most important educational policy reform that has been done in Finland.
I'm jealous. I mean, jealous in the sense that I understand perfectly what you are saying, and we have trouble getting together to do something together, and that's quite an example. Could you give us, after this reform that you mentioned as the, let's say, the turning point of making education a national project, could you give us the main features of what the Finland's educational system has today? Some basic features that you say these are crucial in what you are saying. You have mentioned something that is equality. Everyone, regardless of the social background, would go to the same type of school for everyone. Tell us about those main characteristics that your system has.
Well, this is one important feature, as I mentioned, that it is not allowed, according to Finnish law, to make profit of education, which means that if you look at the primary education sector, it's the vast majority of our schools are public. And it also means that there is no need for ranking lists of schools, for example, and there's no need for parents to kind of select the school according to which is the best. But each parent, each child, each family can be able to trust the school closest to their own home to be one of the best in the world. And this also shows we have quite small differences between schools if you look at the learning outcomes. Another feature which I would emphasize is teachers' educational background. So we demand a master's degree of teachers on all levels of education, from the first class in primary education all the way up to the higher education in universities. And investing in teachers, making sure that the teaching profession is an attractive one and a highly regarded one in society, has also been a very important factor behind the Finnish education system. And because all the teachers have master's degrees, we have also given them a high degree of autonomy in their work. So we don't have that much of standardized testing or control or these type of mechanisms, but we trust the teachers to be pedagogical professionals, to be able to choose learning methods, to be able to be in charge for evaluation and so on. So they are also very involved in how they do the local curricula. So they have good opportunities also to affect their own working environments. On upper secondary level, after primary education, we have like two options. You can go to the general upper secondary level or vocational education. So this is when you're 16, 17, 18. And also on this level, I think one important principle that we have is we talk about no closed doors, which means that even if you want to go to the vocational education, you are still eligible to apply for university after you get your degree. And you will not only study vocational skills, but also mathematics, languages, and so on, so that you also have these general skills and knowledge that you need for working life and for active citizenship.
Let me talk a little bit more about teachers, which is a crucial point within the whole system. And who wants to be a teacher in Finland? Do you have an idea of how a young person will say, I want to be a teacher? And I ask you that question because that's a difficult one for us. And of course, every now and then, I don't know if you have heard about this, but many times when we are discussing, we say, well, we want to have our teachers the most valued persons in society. And whenever we are in the middle of the discussions, many times people say we should be like Finland. And that's a key word in the educational world, as I mentioned before, Finland. Tell us who wants to be a teacher in Finland, what's the social status of a teacher, and the economic status of a teacher in your society.
The social status of teachers is still very good, and it also has a historic tradition. Because as I mentioned, if you look back decades ago in Finland, education was the main way forward for children, also from working class families. So teachers were very highly regarded in villages and smaller cities because they were seen as the kind of representation of the future. There is even a word in Finnish for teachers, which is basically like a kind of a candle of the people, if you would try to translate it.
Sure.
And I think it says a lot about this notion on idea of teachers representing a brighter future for all of society. If you look at the situation nowadays, the teachers are not the most well-paid workers in Finnish society, but it's still a fairly good wage. And if you look at the universities, I think at the moment it's 1 out of 8 students that will get accepted out of those that want to become teachers. So, and that's of course important because it means that the universities can kind of select the best students when they select the students for the teaching profession. But of course, we are also working to make sure that we would get teachers from diverse backgrounds. Also teachers from, we have the indigenous people of the Sami in Finland, for example. We also need teachers who know the Sami language. We need teachers of different ethnic origin and so on. So of course, we also have to make sure that people of diverse backgrounds have the possibilities to get into universities and then practice the teaching profession.
Well, I want to talk to you about immigrants and what happens with the immigrant population in Finland. And maybe it has something to do with what you just said about including these people, which is a challenge. But I'll do it a little later. Don't let me forget. But I want to talk about parents. What's the role of parents in their kids' education?
If you compare it to some countries, for example, United States, where the teacher or the parents are very involved, I would say that the involvement is less in Finland because you don't. I mean, the schools will be. They are responsible for the school meals, for example, for the school books and computers and so on. So the families and parents don't need to take responsibilities for those kind of issues. But of course, it's very important that you have a good connection between teachers and the school and the families. And we have different digital platforms that we use through which the teachers can communicate with the parents and the families about how the children's school days have been, what they have done, and so on. And also for the parents to kind of easily contact with the teachers. And then there are different events during the school years where parents also visit school and can interact with the teachers and other students and so on.
I understand, and I have read about different educational systems throughout the world, that, for example, in Finland, there isn't a lot of pressure on kids about doing homework and doing many jobs that they would have to be spending a lot of time, let's say between quotation marks, studying. Tell me a little bit about that concept or how it works within your system.
It shows in the fact that if you look at the school days in Finland, they are not that long. So if you compare it to many Asian countries which do very well in this international service where you look at learning outcome, the system here is very different because we do want the children to have enough free time. So we would have shorter school days and less homework than in these countries. But of course, we do have homework, but not that much as in some other countries. And I think the whole philosophy in Finland has been one around well-being, forming the basis for learning. So we have to make sure that children and youth also have time for hobbies, that they have time for their families, that they have time for play, if we talk about young children. So they also have time for other things in life than just school. And this kind of balance also forms the best basis for good learning outcomes.
Maybe that's why you are the happiest country in the world.
It might
It could be.
it might be that, but my personal thought around why Finns are the happiest country in the world, I think it has to do with trust. So kind of trust in institutions.
Okay,
That
that's a
you
key
can
word.
trust the education system of your country, or you can trust there to be a social security system if you get unemployed or you're sick. You trust the media, you trust the police not to be corrupt. I think these kind of factors are the ones that are most important if you look at these happiness indicators and the surveys that has been done.
Okay. Now, tell me a little bit about your students. Let's say here we have a student who is finishing high school and is going to go on the next step. How would you characterize a 16, 17 years old Finnish kid who is about to take one more step? Could you give us some characteristics about that person?
Yeah, our education system is based on the system where you need to study until you're 18.
Okay.
So you have to continue on upper secondary level at least until you're 18. And then you will get your degree from upper secondary when you are 19. And after that, you can again apply either for University of Applied Sciences, or you can go directly into the labor market if you want to. And our national goal is of the younger generations would get a degree from universities or universities of applied sciences. At the moment, it's around 43%. But we are seeing also in the Finnish labor market how knowledge demands are growing all the time. So we also need to raise the number of young students who get the degree from university or from the universities of applied sciences. But also around half of the generations will continue straight on till the labor market, especially if you have gone to vocational education and you have a degree from there. You also have the possibilities to start working right away if you want to.
And what about the labor market? That's one of the worries that we have around. These young kids, well, young people, they go study and they want to work. What is happening with the changes in education, the labor market, and the different perspectives that these young people have for what is going to come on in their lives?
If you look at the labor market, I would say that there are several developments going on at the moment that affects the situation of the young people. One is, as I said, we are seeing knowledge demands growing all the time. So there is a huge demand for workforce which are highly skilled, especially with the green transition. For example, you see a lot of new workplaces being born in new sectors where they also need highly skilled workers to be able to meet the demands of the companies. So this is a challenge for the education sector because we need to be able to respond and to educate
Okay.
more and more young people to meet the shortage of highly skilled workers, but also to be able to create opportunities for people who are already in the labor market to update and reskill. Apart from this, of course, you are seeing, I think, all over many countries also this kind of precarization of the labor market, which also affects especially young workers. So when you start out your careers, you will be working, maybe you have short-term contracts, maybe project work, you might be self-employed for some time, work as an entrepreneur. And our social security systems are not very well designed for this type of precarious work. So we also need to kind of update the welfare model in Finland to respond to the new situations in the labor market.
I read recently about in schools, you are working with students in order to face a problem that we have worldwide, which is called fake news. How Tell us a little bit about how you are going about it. It's a problem. It goes all over with the changes that we are seeing. That's one of the dangers, for example, of the development of artificial intelligence. And Finland, again, it may be in other places, but is the first one that I have read that you have seriously taken into account what to do about fake news and directly deal with the subject in school. Tell us about that experience.
We have media literacy incorporated in the curricula as something that we call like a transversal competence. So it's not taught as a separate subject, but it's something that all teachers in all subjects should incorporate into their own teaching. And we start already from early childhood, and then it is a competence throughout the educational system, so also in primary education and on upper secondary level, which the basic task is for young students also to be able to analyze and identify different types of content, to learn how you can check correctness of content, how you can find and use different sources, but of course also to kind of develop the skills in terms of creating content on your own. But I think the most crucial issues, as we live in this kind of information society where we are bombarded with information all the time, some of it completely incorrect, is for people to be able to see the difference between opinion and news, for example, to be able to analyze different bias, different views. When you look at news outlets, for example, they do not all report in the same way. And also to develop your critical thinking skills and this critical knowledge also of different sources.
Minister, I understand you have a baby, a kid, and one of the discussions is about how we go about the early childhood education. How much time they should go, or make it part of the education process of all persons. And as you said before, in comparing, for example, with some countries from Asia, the approach that you have in Finland is very different from theirs. And again, from early childhood, what is it going in there? Are you changing the views about how early you have to start going to school? Please tell us about that. What you plan to do with your kid?
Yeah. Well, in Finland, school starts when you're 7.
Okay.
And we are not planning to change that.
Okay.
We have one pre-primary year. And at the moment, we are evaluating if we should make it 2. And before that, we have early childhood education and care, which you can start participating in from 1 years old if you want to. My own child started when she was 1.5. And early childhood education and care is a combination of care and pedagogy.
Okay.
And we have a lot of so we have both teachers and staff that are more skilled in child care, working in early childhood education and care to kind of get the combination of both. And we have a lot of research data from Finland showing that participating in early childhood education and care is especially important for children that come from less privileged background, who have an immigrant background or might have some problems with learning or some other factor that might constitute like a risk for your later learning outcomes when you start school. So we are really working to get as many children as possible to participate in early childhood education and care, and at the same time making sure we have enough teachers working there, developing language skills, socio-emotional skills, which are very important for later development and also for later learning outcomes in school.
Because if you don't take care of that, quickly you will have a deep inequality in the society. That's
Yes.
now. Let's talk about something that I mentioned before, and it's immigrants. Tell us about the conditions of immigrants in your society. What has been the impact of a society that was fairly homogeneous some years ago, and now you have people coming from many different countries and their conditions, which are very worrisome because they come there because they have been expelled from their countries from one reason or another. Please explain us.
Yeah, I must start by saying that the whole philosophy and the basic principle, of course, is that they are all very welcome.
Okay.
We have a huge demographic crisis in Finland, and we really need more people. So I, at least personally, really wish all children and their families welcome that want to or have to move to Finland for different reasons. They have the right to participate in the education system, in the early childhood education and care, in primary education, with the same rights and same obligations as the rest. But I also must be honest and say that this is one of the biggest challenges for the Finnish education system, in my point of view, is that we have not been able to support the immigrant children well enough, because you can see a difference in the learning outcomes between children with an immigrant background and children whose families have been living in Finland for a longer time, which is, of course, also related to the fact that it's always different and more difficult when you go to school in another language than the one that you are speaking at home with your parents in your free time, with your friends and family, and so on. So we also need to invest even more in their language education and language learning, so that we can make sure that they would be at as an equal level as possible with the children who have been living here for a longer time.
Let me for a second ask a political question in the sense that this is a challenge for your society. As I said, fairly homogeneous a few decades ago, and now changing. And now, as you said, you need people from demographic point of view and from the humanitarian point of view. At least you and what has been the image of Finland, you have been welcoming many people who have been suffering throughout. Now, what is going to happen in Finland with this mixture, with these changes? What do you think? Just speculate a little bit, or not speculate, just tell me what you think.
Yeah, I think of course, we have the same political debates here as you see in many other European countries. We also have parties who are very tough when it comes to immigration and those issues, and also, in my point of view, have very xenophobic attitudes and ways of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's personally, I think it's a big contradiction. Finland is one of the fastest aging countries in Europe. We have a huge shortage of skilled labor at the moment in almost all sectors of our labor markets. And at the same time, we have parties saying that, we don't want people from certain countries or from certain background coming here. So in my party, and me as a politician, I belong to those who really want to say that I wish people welcome here, and I think it's the obligation of society to then try and make sure that every child, every family gets the best possible start in Finnish society, and also possibilities to participate in the education system and so on. But of course, this creates political debates. One discussion that we have had in Finland has to do with segregation, where you see in the bigger cities that families with lower income will concentrate to certain areas in the cities, which also then means that the children will go to certain schools, and you start seeing these differences between schools and areas in the cities that we really haven't had that much of in Finland earlier. So this is of course something that is you can change with political decisions, that has to do with city planning, has to do with housing policy, and also with educational policy, and something that we have been working in the previous government a lot, using new kind of financing mechanisms to support kindergartens and schools that are located in areas with higher unemployment, a higher number of people who do not speak Finnish as their mother tongue, for us to be able to support the teachers and the schools in these areas specifically. And through that also make sure that we can create even more equality within the education system.
I hope you succeed, because you are an example for the world, and I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. If it doesn't work there, we're in trouble, because that has a lot of implications worldwide. So hopefully you can succeed dealing with that issue, which is fascinating, of course. We are just about to finish, and I'm sorry I'm taking too much time from you, but a couple of final questions. One, gender issues, women's equality in society. How come in Finland you women have been able to, from what we see from outside, to go and basically have equality? And if I read well, actually in the schools, kids, males, have fallen behind women in their academic development. Minister, tell us about that.
Well, I think one thing is that we have had a lot of women working very hard throughout the decades for equality and for the status of women. So I think I always say that I owe it to all the women before me, that we have had a situation with 5 female party leaders forming a government together, and also a lot of young women working as ministers. And also one feature in Finland has been that women has done a lot of work together. So no matter what political background you come from, there has been a lot of joint campaigns and joint work. I remember when they first established the law regarding early childhood education and care many years ago, kind of stating that this is the responsibility of society. It was something that all women in parliament from very different ideological and political backgrounds were working together on. So I think that's also an important factor to work together and support one another. If you look at the education system now, I think one challenge is also that how you can, especially if you look at boys that come from working class background, because it used to be decades ago that also in the working class families that education was seen as the main way forward, also for the boys and for the men from a working class background. And I think this has changed a bit, because you are seeing it all over the world. I think maybe that people are thinking, I might become a YouTube star, or I might become, a football star. There are all these kind of different ideas that young people will have around how they want to make it in life. And I guess that the status of education is not as strong in working class families as it used to be before, especially when you look at boys. So that's especially something that we need to work on also in the education sector. And we have talked a lot about reading, how we can encourage more boys to read, because there you have seen a clear decline. You look at how many boys will read voluntary, just books in their free time. It has been declining a lot because nowadays they're all playing games or watching some videos on YouTube.
Minister, finally, let me ask very short questions. You are a politician, and from what I read, you have been involved in politics basically forever. Are you happy with that?
Yes, I am, because I've always said that I want to do politics as long as I feel like it is, possible to change the world and society through that, and to change it for the better. So you still have this kind of ideological fire in yourself, like this feeling that you really want to address issues and do something about them. And I still have that feeling, so I will stay in parliament as long as I have that feeling within me.
Okay, and how about Minister of Education? Have you enjoyed it, or tell me about that personal
It was my
experience?
dream job, and I really have enjoyed it as well, because I think not all ministers might have the feeling when they go to work every morning that today I get to work with and for the future of my country. And as Minister of Education, you really get that feeling. So in my ministry, all the workers, me as the minister, we call our ministry for the house of the future, because that's the work that we do there all the time.
Minister, to finish, tell us about many women are going to see us and to listen to us. Send a message to young women in Colombia about politics and about women's issues in society.
Well, one message would be that politics is also our place. We are needed in politics. We should get involved. We should work hard. We should demand our space in politics, because politics is not just for people of a certain age or a certain sex, gender, or a certain background, but decisions that are made affects all of society, everyone. So you can't shut anybody out of decision making. It's as much a place for young women as it is for old men. And I also want to emphasize the importance of supporting each other and working together, because young women all over the world will also always face obstacles, and they will face people who do not believe in them when they start going into politics. And that's the place where we need to support each other.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'm very happy to have had this conversation with you. You have a friend here in Colombia. I'm sure many friends.
Here.
Hope to to meet you personally one more sometime in our lives. And congratulations, and keep working for Finland. And you are an example for us, and we take it very seriously what you have told us. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It was a pleasure to be involved.
Okay, bye bye.
Esta fue la conversación que tuve con la exministra de Educación de Finlandia, Li Andersson. Era ministra en funciones cuando la entrevisté. En nuestra tierra hay una frase que a menudo repetimos y nos decimos nosotros mismos: recuerden que estamos en Cundinamarca, no en Dinamarca. Estamos en Colombia y no en Finlandia, pero podemos aprender muchas cosas de esa conversación que tuvimos con la exministra. Mucho que aprender desde Finlandia, mucho que incorporar a nuestro sistema educativo. Recuerden, nos pueden ver y escuchar en las plataformas de streaming. Activen las notificaciones. Nos pueden seguir en las redes sociales. Cualquier comentario que ustedes nos quieran enviar, bienvenido. Nos servirá para tenerlo en cuenta para próximas ediciones de nuestro video podcast El Profesor, yo, Sergio Fajardo, con Educación Todo se puede.